It has been reported that Scott Bessent in Trump's cabinet was bragging that this so-called new, big, beautiful bill of Trump's has a backdoor way to privatize Social Security. So I want to ask you, why do you think they want to privatize Social Security? What's the big urge for it? It won't make more money for any of us, but it will for those wealthy people behind it. Keep in mind that Republicans and the GOP has been a party that benefits the wealthy almost since its conception. Yes, it began as a liberal party, a progressive party, but after Lincoln's assassination, it was corrupted under the presidency of U.S. Grant and, and by the wealthy railroads, and it began to be perverted, and it became a party that benefited the wealthy. And until FDR came on the scene, the Democratic Party really wasn't too much better. But after that, the Democratic Party really became the party of the working man. Yes, the Democratic Party has a lot of work to do to repair some of the damage, but that's the way it has been. But they, from the beginning, they saw no need for Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid, any of these things that benefit the poor and the middle class because they are not in it. A wealthy person does not get to the end of their life and then have to struggle and wonder whether they're going to spend their money on food or heat. A wealthy person just lives a life of Riley right up to their final days. They don't have that anxiety. So they opposed Social Security from the very beginning, and they still did. Only thing was, when Ronald Reagan came into office, the Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, a Democrat, and the leader of the Senate, Bob Dole, a Republican, they met with Ronald Reagan. And one of the differences between Reagan and our current administration was that he would sit down at the end of the day with the Democrats, with Speaker O'Neill, and they had a friendly relationship. They might argue and they might fight over policy during the day, but when the clock hit 5 o'clock and they punched out, they would meet often for cocktails, and they'd talk more friendly about these situations and try to work it out. Well, Bob Dole and Tip O'Neill met with Ronald Reagan, and they discussed Social Security's future. And they saw two possible conclusions that would have to be done to keep Social Security going. As the baby boomers were retiring, it looked like there'd be less people paying into Social Security. So they decided, they concluded that there would be two choices. One, they could cut benefits way back, getting the amount of money we get back and all the services that come with it. Or two, they could take and raise the taxes on those doing the working. The three men concluded that none of those two choices was a good choice. And so they came up with a third alternative. They decided to create a new fund, that trust fund. And what they did is they doubled the tax on working Americans, or Social Security tax. Half of that tax, because up to this point, Social Security had been a pay-as-you-go, one generation that's working paying for the retired generation. And so half of that money coming in would go to pay for the retirees. The other half would go into this trust fund. Now, they had a way to keep the rich from being disgruntled because the rich said, we don't need that. Why do this? There wasn't the idea of being loyal to your fellow American. So what they said was, we'll put a cap. It started at 70,000. So anything above that amount was tax-free. And that cap has been raised to something like 130-something thousand. That means that a person making $1 million and 130 some dollars, that $1 million they paid no Social Security tax on, just that first 130. And so that kept them happy. And they realized that as we got closer to the baby boomer generation fully being retired, and once the baby boomer generation all died off, that trust fund would be depleted, and then we go back to just a pay-as-you-go, working generation paying for the retired generation. But they also realized that as we got closer to everybody and all the baby boomers in retirement, they might have to take and tweak this system. And by having that cap, they have that ability. They could either totally remove the cap, or they could gradually raise it up. And that's what a lot of these wealthy people are afraid of. They're afraid that they're going, instead of being having $1 million, they might have 900,000 dollars and 99 on down. They might just take, they might lose 100,000. And if you have $1 million, 100,000 is not that big a deal. And most of them are far more than millionaires. That's part of what they're afraid of. But it's not just fear; it's also greed, because they have so much they have nothing to worry about. But now they're looking at that trust fund, and it's been very, very successful. There are trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in that trust fund, which is why they want to privatize it. Because the overhead, the percentage that management gets for managing that Social Security trust fund is very, very small, something like 2%. Now, a private investment firm, they skim off something like 20 to 30% of that amount. And that's what they're looking at. They're looking at a possibility of them being able to skim off far more of our money that those rich people did not put into. We did. But they are greedy, wanting to get their hands on it. They want to take our money and give it to them. And then when the money is gone, they're just going to say, sorry, Charlie, because they don't care. They have enough to live on. There's another scheme to get more money. Instead of making a better product, instead of working harder, they want to steal from us. And that's precisely what this is about. It's an attempt to steal our hard-earned money. And what will be the result? Well, before Social Security, the elderly died of cold and cold weather or heat in the different times of year, and from malnutrition, not having enough money for food. That is no way for a country as advanced as the United States to be. If this is that, so as they call it, what's the term they use for the United States being so great? They want to say the greatest nation, and that's why they say, if you treat your elderly that way, you're not great. But that's why they want to go back to. When they say make America great again, what they really mean is let's have those wealthy people getting everything, and the rest of us having to sell for whatever crumbs falls to the ground. They even have the gall with their so-called trickle-down economics to say some of the crumbs will fall to those of you on the bottom. Some of the crumbs from our tables. Maybe the meatball that they put into the mouth, they'll cough out and it falls to the ground. One of us can maybe grab that up and eat it. That is how they look at us. And it's time to realize we got to keep Social Security, not the way it is. We got to take that cap off of it and make the wealthy pay the same amount of tax that we pay on every dime. Same as the income tax. The wealthy need to be paying their fair share. They pay less in percentage than those of us. Some of them pay no taxes. They should be paying. There should be no billionaires. They should be able to have $100 million and no more. Once they hit that $100 million in wealth, every dollar is then taxed 100%. So they never are able to have more than that. Because why? They take it from all of us. And we become poorer and poorer as they become richer and richer. And why? Because they have a disease of hoarding. They want to hoard the wealth. Anyway, my friends, that is why they're trying to steal our Social Security. Be ready to fight to keep what's yours. Thank you. Have a good night.